I think the most important message in this book, with all of the stories based on interviews with 145 different refugee families, is that refugees succeed in Canada. And they can arrive with nothing, but when you check up with them a few decades later, they are producing proud Canadians. And it doesn't matter what language they arrive with, it doesn't matter what the situation was, they succeed and they end up putting more into Canada than Canada puts into them. Today, there's a lot of questioning whether we should have immigration, whether we've taken too many, whether it's a good idea to take refugees. And I think the lesson of these people who came 50 years ago is that they were extremely successful. They were extremely proud to be part of Canada, and they add to our society. And as a result, you can't measure a refugee by what happens the first week. 50 years later, these people have had a whole lifetime. They've had children, many of them have grandchildren. And when we look at the achievements of the first family, the second generation, the third generation, we see people who really want to succeed and who in fact do succeed, and again, as I say, contribute a lot to our country. Introduce you to my wife, Jo, has always been a huge support of my work with refugees. Introduce you to my colleague, Stephanie Stobie, who is a professor at Canadian Mennonite University, an expert in conflict resolution, and a former Laotian refugee herself. But for the younger generation, you know, it's important to remember where you came from. You know, I know the struggle for the first decade or two is all about coming to terms with being in Canada and becoming part of Canada. But we all come from somewhere else, aside from our indigenous population. We all come from somewhere else, and preserving those memories and keeping that culture alive and keeping the recipes in the family is a patriotic thing to do in this country. They can get, in Edmonton, they can get the book from MacEwan University bookstore. But most good bookstores in Canada are carrying the book.
Our elected officials, Vietnamese and community organizations, distinguished guests, and all attendees. My name is Jessica Trong, co-founder of Vietnamese Edmonton Cultural Society, supporting the Edmonton Vietnamese Association. Now I'm going to speak Vietnamese for the second time. Xin chào quý đại diện chính quyền các hội đồng Việt Nam và ngoại quốc, quý vấn khách cùng toàn thể tâm điều kiện. Tôi là Jessica Chương, rất hân hạnh đại đến cho hội người Việt Edmonton và nhóm chúng ta cùng nhau để hướng dẫn chương trình chiếu phim và ra mắt sách câu chuyện của người Thái nạn trong Nam Á ngày hôm nay.
Hello, xin chào. My name is Linda Huang. Tên tiếng Việt là Hoàng Cẩm Tú, and along with Jessica, I'm co-founder of Chúng ta cùng nhau. This means we are together in Vietnamese. So we are so thrilled that all of you have gathered together with us today. We are a new nonprofit organization that is helping children of Vietnamese immigrants, as well as the broader Vietnamese community, as well as the broader Edmonton community, come together to celebrate and better understand and preserve Vietnamese heritage. And as Jessica said in Vietnamese, we're proud to support the Edmonton Vietnamese Association today with this Stories of Southeast Asian Refugees.
Before we begin, we wanted to acknowledge that the land which we are gathered on is Treaty 6 territory. The traditional homes for many First Nations who have been coming together long before the creation of Canada. This includes the Nahiya Cree, Dene, Nakota Sioux, Anishinaabe, Saulteaux, Ojibwe, Blackfoot, Métis, and Inuit. There would be no stories of Southeast Asian refugees in Canada if not for the first peoples who tended and protected this land. We're grateful for their care. We're grateful that their care has allowed generations, including those who arrived later, to find refuge here.
Today's event comes just a few days before the 51st anniversary of the fall of Saigon, which occurred on April 30th, 1975. This was the day that the southern Vietnamese capital, city of Saigon, was overtaken by the northern Vietnamese Communist Army, and it marked the end of the Vietnam War, while also triggering a mass exodus of Vietnamese who then immigrated around the world, including right here in Canada.
And it was not just the Vietnamese people who came. Between 1975 and 1997, some 3 million Vietnamese, Cambodian, and Laotian fled atrocities in their homes, in their home countries, with more than 210,000 resettling in Canada. While this history is partly known to some Canadians, little has been written about it, especially from the perspective of refugees themselves.
So that's why we're here. That's what the book Hearts of Freedom and the related documentary, which many of you would have seen, Passage to Freedom, is all about. These are rich oral histories based on interviews with 145 former refugees from Southeast Asian countries who share deeply moving accounts of oppression, concentration camps, genocide, and their perilous escapes over land and sea.
Survivors reflect on their first impressions of Canada, the unfamiliar snow and cold, like today, the unexpected kindness of neighbors, and occasional encounters with racism. Through their experiences, we come to understand the strengths and weaknesses of Canada's refugee program. These stories reveal how refugees' attachment to Canada grew over the years, and how multiculturalism policies facilitate that.
So coming at a time especially when we are, as a country and a province, reassessing benefits of immigration and refugee policies and programs, this book, Hearts of Freedom, documents the lives and contributions of the many people who really suffered the worst from the war to rebuild their lives here in Canada.
We're excited to share more about the book here today with all of you, alongside the book's authors and local Vietnamese refugees in a panel discussion to highlight the launch of the Hearts of Freedom book. The book is also available for purchase following this conversation right in the back corner there.
We want to acknowledge that this event is presented by the Edmonton Vietnamese Association, and we'd like to now invite President Tran to share a few words on behalf of the EVA.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dear representatives of the government, other friendly Vietnamese Association, distinguished guests, and all attendees. My name is Yu Tran, the current president of the Edmonton Vietnamese Association. On behalf of the EVA, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the Canadian government and people who have allowed and welcomed us to build a new life of freedom, prosperity, happiness in now our great adopted country. Thank you to all friendly organizations, volunteers, and participants for your support and assistance in making today's event possible. Thanks to the City of Edmonton and its staff for providing us with the venue and equipment for today. I was one of the so-called old people myself who fled the Vietnamese Communist regime with my siblings by boat after they took over South Vietnam in 1975. We arrived at one of the Indonesian islands and saved by members of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, known as UNHCR. We were later allowed to be resettled in Canada in 1982. Besides the refugees escaping from Cambodia and Laos, for the Vietnamese refugees alone, there were about 2 million people escaping from North and South Vietnam to flee the communist regime by sea or land in the late 70s and early 80s. It was estimated about more than 300,000 of these people lost their lives in the jungles, by attack, robbed, killed by the Thai pirates, or died in the storm of the Pacific Ocean. My father was a colonel in the South Vietnamese Army. He was captured by the North Vietnamese communists and kept in a different concentration camp for 13 years, from 1975 to 1988. We forgive, but we will never forget. This is also a part of the word and Canadian immigration history that we need to document and pass on to our future generation, which is now the third generation. Together we will share our life experience, help each other, and build a prosperous, happy Edmonton, Alberta, and Canada. We hope that you all enjoy and have an open-hearted and memorable time. Thank you very much. Kính chào quý đại diện chính quyền, các hội đồng bạn và Việt Nam và ngoại quốc, quý quan khách cùng toàn thể tham dự viên. Tôi là Trần Hiệp Vũ, hội trưởng đương thời của Hội người Việt Edmonton. Thay mặt hội, trước hết tôi trân trọng cảm ơn chính quyền và người dân Canada đã cho phép và đón tiếp chúng ta để cùng xây dựng một đời sống mới tự do, ấm no và hạnh phúc ở xứ Đại Lương chúng ta. Cảm ơn sự ủng hộ, hỗ trợ và giúp đỡ của các hội đoàn, tình nguyện viên và các tham dự viên để chúng ta có một buổi tổ chức ngày hôm nay. Cảm ơn thành phố Edmonton và các nhân viên đã cho chúng ta sử dụng địa điểm và các phương tiện cho ngày hôm nay. Tôi cũng là một thành nhân đạo động viên cùng các anh chị em sau khi Cộng sản Bắc Việt chiếm miền Nam năm 1975. Chúng tôi đến được một trại tị nạn trong quần đảo Indonesia và được cứu giúp bởi cao ủy viên tị nạn Liên Quốc năm 1981 và được phép đi định cư tại Canada năm 1982. Ngoài những người tị nạn cộng sản từ Campuchia và Lào, về những người tị nạn Việt Nam nói riêng, có khoảng trên 2 triệu người vượt thoát chế độ cộng sản bằng đường bộ, biển sau năm 1975 đến với thập niên 80. Ước lượng có khoảng trên 300.000 người chết trên biển Thái Bình Dương, rừng sâu nước động, hoặc bị cướp và giết hại bởi bọn hải tặc Thái Lan. Và tôi là một sĩ quan trong quân đội Việt Nam Cộng Hòa. Ông đã bị Cộng sản Bắc Việt bắt và giam trong các trại tập trung 13 năm, từ 1955 đến 88. Chúng ta tha thứ nhưng sẽ không bao giờ quên. Đây là một phần trong lịch sử di dân của thế giới và của người Canada mà chúng ta cần ghi chép lại và truyền lại cho thế hệ sau này, và hiện nay là thế hệ thứ ba. Chúng ta sẽ chia sẻ những kinh nghiệm sống, giúp đỡ lẫn nhau để cùng xây dựng một Edmonton, Alberta, Canada cùng linh và hạnh phúc. Ước mong chúng ta sẽ có một thời gian cởi mở và đáng ghi nhớ. Xin chân thành cảm ơn.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Linda. And welcome to my place of employment. This is actually where I work. My office is just over there, and I'm really proud to be the very first Vietnamese city councillor in the city of Edmonton. ago, and I'm sorry I lost my voice due to the playoffs, not because I'm sick. 2 years ago, a lot of times my mom doesn't drive, and so she asked me to drive her to a Vietnamese showing to go with my aunt and a few friends. I had no idea that that day would actually open the gates to me knowing exactly what my life and how I got here into Edmonton. So 2 years ago, I realized, thank you to Mr. Mike Malloy and Dr. Stephanie Stobie there, about how I came to Edmonton. So I came to Edmonton when I was 1 month old. My parents were part of the boat people who had left Vietnam and they had gone to Thailand in a refugee camp. My mom was pregnant when she got to that refugee camp, and we had to live in that refugee camp for 8 months and 1 day till I was born, till we could decide where we were going to go. And we were going to go to either Australia, Canada, or we were going to go to Australia, California, or Edmonton. And lucky for me, they chose Edmonton. From then, my parents put us all through university, myself and two other sisters that I have. They opened up Nhung Ban Nhi, which a lot of you may have known going to Chinatown. And then really after a long history, I then ran to be an elected official and got to be a councillor for Ward CQ Biniwang, which is in West Edmonton. So I am so happy and so thrilled to invite you today to City Hall, which is really a home for all Edmontonians, for a place to gather and a place to share some of our stories. I'd like to thank the organizing committee for having this here in City Hall. I'd like to thank the panelists who you'll hear from, and I'd like to thank Viet, Chúng for really continuing to bring these stories together so that not only I can understand where I'm coming from and how much my parents really persevered for us to be strong and to build a great life here in Edmonton, but also for my 3 children and their continuing families. So I just want to thank you so much, everybody, for coming here today. Thank you so much for letting me welcome you to City Hall. The mayor will be coming shortly to also give greetings from City of Edmonton. But thank you for coming into this space. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for sharing the stories.
Thank you too. All right, so we did want to, before we hear now from Mike Malloy, one of the book's co-authors, we did want to thank a few partners for supporting this event today. We'd like to thank the Children of Vietnam Benevolent Foundation. We'd like to thank Fascinating Film Festival Edmonton. This is an Asian-centered film festival that takes place May 12th to 16th. You can see the program and get tickets at fascination.ca.
We'd also like to thank Vietbest Alberta, Canada's first and only non-fiction writing festival, for their support with this event. Ellen's over there, she's executive director of it. Vietbest provides a platform for conversations that challenge, intrigue, and inspire, from economy and ecology to personal stories and cultural commentary. Today's book certainly falls into that category.
And thank you to Ban Mi Diddy. This is owned by Yvonne Ho, who is also one of our panelists. That's the refreshments that you have been having. Ban Mi Diddy blends Saigon street food with Alberta ingredients to create modern Ban Mi Vietnamese sandwiches and other drinks and treats.
So to begin our book panel and Southeast Asian refugee conversation, we'd like to first invite up Mike Malloy. Mike Malloy is the Hearts of Freedom co-author and former president of the Canadian Immigration Historical Society. Mike has extensive experience in the immigration field, working in this industry since 1968, so since he was like 2 years old. From 1976 to 1978, he was Director of Refugee Policy Immigration Headquarters in Ottawa. He oversaw the design of the refugee programs authorized in the 1976 Immigration Act, including the selection system for convention refugees and the Indo-Chinese designated class and the private refugee sponsorship program. In 1979 and 1980, he was senior coordinator of the Indo-Chinese refugee program that brought 60,000 refugees to Canada. He also put in an adjunct research professor. He is also an adjunct research professor at Carleton University. Mike will briefly describe the origins of the Book of Hearts of Freedom, stories of the Southeast Asian refugees, and the government policies and programs that made it possible. Welcome, Mike.
Now, in terms of how it got started, my co-author, Peter Dushinsky, who is not here today, and who is a Holocaust survivor and a Hungarian refugee as well, we're finishing off the first of our books, which was called Running on Empty, which was about how we brought the people there. And then we got two interesting signals from Alberta. First, the Vietnamese Association in Calgary called me up and said, would you mind if we bought 200 copies? I said, look, I had to think about that for a second. But more importantly, we learned as we were finishing off that a delegation was meeting with a professor at Carleton who was interested in doing something to preserve the memories of the refugees. And could we be of assistance? So that resulted in the creation of what was called the Hearts of Freedom Project. And that project started out with 4 deliverables, 4 products. First of all, we trained teams of young Vietnamese, Laotians, and Cambodians, and we sent them out across the country, and they came back with interviews from 145 refugee families. And there isn't a single one of those interviews that couldn't be made into a movie. The stories are so dramatic, the struggles are so terrifying, and the courage and perseverance shown by the refugees themselves is so inspiring that as the stories rolled in, there were times we read them with tears in our eyes. So we took those 145 stories and we put them on a website. It's called, oddly enough, heartsofreedom.org, heartsofreedom.org. So you can see the actual interviews there. The second thing that came out of the project was the documentary you just saw, Passage to Freedom, which I think tells the story of the people who fled Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, and their experiences in Canada, in 45 minutes in a most amazing way. And I hope you'd enjoy it as much as we did. The third deliverable was the book, and if you want to know more about that, buy one, read it. I'll say a bit more about it in a minute. And the fourth idea we had was that we didn't think there was enough happening in the schools, particularly middle school, about refugees. So we will be launching later this year packages of curriculum materials that tie together the documentary, the book, and the website, and give students a chance to work with all three. So that is the fourth. And then my learner friend, Stephanie, came up with the fourth idea, which was the idea of a traveling exhibition, which told the story in English and French on a number of panels that could be moved around the room. Stephanie has taken that exhibition to 30 different locations in Canada. It spent the winter in Humboldt, Saskatchewan, and very, very recently she took it to Bangkok. So the story of the refugees and the story of Canada, how it dealt with the refugees, is being spread by this project. There's a couple of things that are unique about this book that you will not find in anything else that's ever been published.
First of all, it is unique because it not only tells the story of the Vietnamese, but it talks about, it has chapters on the Laotians, and it tells chapters on the Cambodians. And it includes, in all of those groups, the Chinese minorities and the Hill tribe minorities. So we tell the whole story on that. Second, the book deals with the settlement experience of these people after they arrived here in locations from Halifax to Vancouver. We're the only book that does that. You get books that talk about this experience in BC or in northeast, southwestern New Brunswick, or and there are a couple of good articles in Quebec, but we tell the story on a national scale. We also, wherever possible, have told the story in the refugees' own words. We worked with the interviews, and we picked up the best things, the best things that they said that explain what was happening to them, how they were feeling about it, when they were frightened, when they were elated, when they were confused. We were able to pull those stories out. So when you read it, you're not reading what we think about it. You're reading what the people themselves are experiencing. And we thought that was very, very important. And finally, we made sure as well that we looked at the experiences of the government-assisted refugees, the privately sponsored refugees, and the refugees who were sponsored by families. So you get a lot in that book, and I think it's worth getting for that. And you simply won't find that anywhere else. There's a couple of things that may surprise you. When we started working on the book, particularly on the Vietnamese community, we quickly found from the interviews that there were profound differences between the people who got out of Dodge, as they say, as the tanks were rolling into North Vietnam, and the people who came later as boat people and who had lived and experienced life under a communist regime. So you'll find, in addition to the person we just shot, you'll find that we coined the term war refugees to talk about that initial group of people, many of whom were descendants of people who came from the north when it was possible to do so in the 50s. And as the communists came, they really knew that they had to get out of there. So you'll find a unique chapter on the war refugees, and then a series of chapters on the boat people who begin to show up in big numbers in 1978. So that makes it a really interesting read, and I mean, we're really proud of it, and we hope you'll enjoy it as much as we enjoyed it. It took two together. All we should aim between the eyes, because they're larger than the world, what they are. Anyway, just what the book does is that it provides a snapshot of the experiences of 117,000 Vietnamese refugees, 16,800 Cambodian refugees, and 7,200 Laotian refugees, plus another 64,000 people who came out in a family reunification program directly from Vietnam that we ran alongside the refugee program. So anything else I need to say? I said I wouldn't say too much. Okay, now moving on very quickly to the government policies that made all this thing work. In 1976, the government brought into existence what was called the 1976 Immigration Act. Up to that stage in my career, we worked under the 1952 Act, which was an act that was fixed directly on the past, said nothing about who does to come in, but said a hell of a lot about who wasn't going to come to Canada. So with this act, for the first time ever, we had a whole bunch of provisions that dealt with refugees. And my job at that stage was to take those words on the page and turn them into something that actually happens. So there's, among other things, the United Nations definition of a refugee, someone with a well-founded fear of persecution, was embedded in our law. And there were, and what was really interesting was this idea of private sponsorship, which is, by the way, is something that's spread out across the world. We were told recently by the refugee hub in Ottawa that since Canada decided to start marketing the approach of community involvement in refugee settlement, 2 million refugees have benefited around the world from community sponsorship as opposed to government settlement. The private sponsorship, as we conceived it, was designed to allow national organizations, for example, the Mennonite Central Committee, or the Anglican Church of Canada, or the Diocese of who knows where, as well as local organizations. And my own contribution to this, having worked with a bunch of friends to build fences together in the backyard, was I thought, what about groups of neighbors? And so we came up with the idea of groups of 5 citizens getting together, putting the resources together, and being able to sponsor just as if they were part of a church or a bigger organization. And that became a very important part of the movement of the people from Indochina. So that's the first thing. The first important thing is the sponsorship program. The second thing is something a little bit more subtle and less visible. It was called the Indo-Chinese Designated Class. If you're going to deal with someone as a convention refugee, your decision will implicate every country in the world that has signed the Refugee Convention. So you have to be careful. It takes a long time. You have to grill the person. You have to investigate before you give them that status. For the Indo-Chinese refugees, we didn't think that mattered at all. And so the government brought together a special regulation that said if someone is a citizen or resident of Vietnam, Laos, or Cambodia, and they left the country after the fall of Saigon, and they haven't been accepted by anybody else, and they're not willing to go home, and they'd like to come to Canada, you are in our wheelhouse. And the impact, that sounds very bureaucratic, but what that did, it meant that you could deal with a refugee, instead of 90 minutes, 15 minutes, you could make a decision and gather all the information. And when the government told us that they wanted us to bring 60,000 people to the country, the time saved meant that we were able actually to do it. If we had to use the convention refugee approach, we'd have never done it in time. So that's it. So over to
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry to come in partway through. The great thing about Saturdays in Edmonton is there are so many incredible things happening across the city. The bad thing when you're in this role is you have to try to be at all of them, and so I have to swing in between. And so sorry to cut in just before you here, but so excited to be here with you with my council colleague, who I know you already heard from, Councillor Chúng who is an incredible leader within our city. We also have to give a shout out to Councillor Parmar's mom, and so we want to say thank you for you being here, and thank you for your leadership. So I didn't have anything formally prepared, but very excited to be here with you to be just a small part of this, to celebrate this important day. And just even listening into the bit that I've had a chance to hear so far, the importance of the stories that are being told in this book, and the importance of all of those experiences, the good and the bad. And I think something I heard a little bit about before, right at the start of this, you think about sort of where we're at right now in our country's history, where things are at here in this province, and I really feel like this is coming out right at the right time to sort of push back against some of what's happening outside this City Hall, because what I love about City Hall, this is a space for everyone. We welcome everyone, we want everyone here. It doesn't matter your background, your story, this is a place where you're welcome. And that's generally how we've operated as a country. And yet, you know, we're seeing this I'm going to call it just very frustrating push to introduce a different conversation. And I don't want to get too, I mean, it sounds weird, I don't want to get too political in City Hall. I still get political in City Hall all the time. But I think, you know, it's just a few days ago that there was a series of announcements about something's going to happen later this year that just really pains me. And so to have this conversation here in this room, it's a bit of a reminder of why it's so important for us to continue to learn the stories of others who have had the chance to come here, who have had that experience. And I know it wasn't always perfect when people made the journey here. But at the end of the day, this is a place where we need to continue to embrace and welcome everyone, where we need to celebrate what makes us the same, but also celebrate what makes us different. And so as I think about what's going to come later this year, I'm reminded as I stand in this room with all of you about how great we are as a city, as a province, as a country, and how many people have contributed to that, who have gone through a lot of hardship to get here, to be able to have that opportunity to contribute, to be able to make Canada what it is today. So let's remember that over the next months. Let's talk about it a lot over the next couple of months here. Let's talk about it with our friends, our families, strangers we meet at the grocery store. Because I think sometimes, you know, I'm thinking about what will happen later, and I worry there's going to be a bit of complacency for those of us who are just sort of used to it. I'm sure I'm in a room here of folks who know the importance of welcoming everyone and anyone, because that is what we've done. And I think I'm almost worried that sometimes we might just sort of rest on our laurels and be like, it's good, it's fine. You know, we don't need to continue to promote this and talk about it. So thank you for being here, for all of you, for our guests here. Thank you for organizing this incredible event. Thank you to all of you here who are being a part of this and for telling all these stories and just looking at everything that we've got spread throughout these council or from the City Hall. Looking forward to seeing how we will continue to work together to welcome others, to celebrate others who are coming in here, because that is what we should continue to always do going forward. So thanks for having me, everyone.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, joining us now to share selected readings from the book is Dr. and Professor Stephanie Petsamay-Stobe. Stephanie is a professor in Business and Conflict Resolution Studies at Canadian Mennonite University. She's also an expert in Southeast Asian conflict resolution processes. She's led peace-building efforts worldwide. She's advised organizations. She serves as president of the Canadian Association for Refugee and Forced Migration Studies, a published author and editor. She also created and curated, as we've heard, the Hearts of Freedom Stories of Southeast Asian Refugees Museum exhibition that's traveled across Canada. It was awarded the King Charles III Coronation Medal at the Senate of Canada, and this year it had its international opening in Thailand. You also would recognize her face because she was featured in the Passage to Freedom film that we just screened as well. Stephanie is a refugee, a former refugee from Laos. Welcome, Stephanie.
For the introductions, and I would like to echo Mike's thanks to all the people who were involved in organizing this amazing event in this beautiful space. So thank you so much to the Vietnamese Association, the City Hall here, and Linda and Jess and others who have made this possible. This is my second time in Edmonton. I think I was here 2 years ago when we brought the Hearts of Freedom exhibition here, and we had a wonderful event, and the community is so warm, so I'm very happy to be able to join you again this year. So I'm going to say a little bit about the book from the three communities and read just very short passages from the book. And to add to what Michael was saying earlier, this book, Hearts of Freedom, Stories of Southeast Asian Refugees, are the stories of the refugees in their own words. And as mentioned before, a few Canadians know about this history, but not much has been written about it. And somewhat surprisingly, very little research has focused on refugee stories over the course of a lifetime. So we followed them right from the moment they were living in Vietnam, for example, and their escape route via the South China Sea to refugee camps, and then coming here to Canada and looking at what they have been doing here for the last number of years. So it's following their full story. And if all of our authors were here today, we would take turns reading from the book, but in their absence, I will incorporate some of their thoughts as well as my own. And so the first number of chapters focus on the Vietnamese. And Peter Dushinsky usually tells the Vietnamese stories. And so the Vietnamese refugees who have become proud Canadians are an important part of this book. Their stories, based on over 80 oral history interviews, are presented in 7 chapters in parts 1 and 2 of this book. So part 1 describes the war refugees of 1975. Most of them were military men, government employees, business people, academics, who escaped on naval ships, helicopters leaving from the roof of U.S. Embassy in Saigon, and small fishing boats. They were evacuated to the Pacific Islands and to the U.S. mainland, and between 1975 and 1978, Canada resettled almost 9,000 of them. And then part 2 talks about the largest group of Vietnamese refugees. They left Vietnam in a rusty freighter, a small and overcrowded, unseaworthy fishing boats, at the mercy of pirates and stormy seas, heading for what they hoped would be better lives somewhere. These were the Vietnamese old people. Many did not make it, and I think Mike mentioned a conservative figure that about 300,000 perished in the South China Sea. They ended up in refugee camps along the South China Sea in Malaysia, Indonesia, Hong Kong, the Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. Eventually, they were resettled in countries like Canada. And I think our host mentioned that between 1979 and 1980, over 60,000 Southeast Asian refugees, mostly Vietnamese, were resettled in Canada. And then between 1975 and 1997, over 210,000 Southeast Asians resettled here in Canada. And so today, Canada's Vietnamese ethnic community is about 300,000 members. And in the early years, the refugees experienced a lot of difficulty. They had to learn the language, they had to understand the dangers of the cold climate, they have to get used to Canadian foods, they worked for low wages and difficult jobs. And so to create better conditions for themselves and to maintain their cultural belonging, they founded ethnic associations soon after arriving. And with time, persistence, and the help of generous people, they gradually emerged as successful Canadians. And this success story demonstrates how immigrants are positive contributors to the Canadian mosaic. And so I want to read from our book a short passage from Ho Kong Tran, who is a well-established Edmonton accountant. And as president of the Vietnamese Buddhist temple in Edmonton, Ho Kong Tran has maintained a strong connection to Vietnamese culture, which for him is essentially a Canadian thing to do. Also, he is a proud member of several nonprofits doing community work. He has taken his successful children to Vietnam to reconnect them with Vietnamese roots. For him, this too is a Canadian action. He considers helping others and not judging them. As he says, I can relate to the most recent Syrian people. In Edmonton, we have a group organized by Nung Tran Davies. She was a refugee in the 1980s. So now I will go and share some of the stories of the Cambodian. Usually Colleen Lundy or other co-author describes their stories. So from 1975 to 1979, 3 years, 8 months, and 20 days, the campaign of genocide in Cambodia killed approximately 2 million people, 1/4 of its population. Civilians died through starvation, execution, torture, forced labor, and untreated diseases. Bodies were buried in mass graves called the killing fields. Those whose experiences are recorded in Hearts of Freedom are among the survivors. After the Khmer Rouge takeover, life in Cambodia was drastically reorganized, resulting in severe hardship, starvation, illness, terror, and death. Everyone was forced to live on communal farms, forced labor camps. The premise was to create a model classless agrarian society and to destroy the family structure to shift loyalty to the Khmer Rouge. Family members could no longer live together. Civil and political rights, money, and religious practices were abolished. Those who were professionals were viewed as expendable, the population to be purged, and they hid their academic background. They were treated as prisoners and stripped of all belongings except a few clothes. Overwork and starvation took their toll. Many fled the borders to Thailand, a treacherous journey through the jungle, encountering landmines, bamboo spikes buried in the ground, and bodies of those who died escaping. By the summer of 1979, there was a refugee crisis at the Thai border with the arrival of 500,000 Cambodians. By the mid-1980s, there were at least 20 camps near or on the Thai-Cambodian borders, some with populations of over 100,000 people. And the refugee camps varied in size and in the resources they provided. Some camps included a hospital, a temple, and a Christian church. Khao Wan Dang refugee camp was constructed in 1979, and it's one of the largest with a population of 136,000 people. Resettlement in Canada took perseverance, courage, and hope. Government-sponsored refugees were initially placed in hotels and often faced isolation, loneliness, and depression. They were given pocket money for food, but they didn't know how to order from a menu. Overall, those who were privately sponsored quickly felt connection and were less isolated than those who were government-sponsored, but they still encountered challenges of a new culture, climate and customs, language, and social system. Despite the challenges, Cambodian refugees quickly found employment and began rebuilding their lives. So I'll just read shortly from the chapter on Minor Shore, who shares his settlement experiences in Canada. He never felt like an outsider and credits Canada's emphasis on multiculturalism. War is a great tragedy that must be avoided at all costs, but you can still remake your life. All this is very important because in life, the most important thing is that someone is reaching out to you to get back on track. As a Southeast Asian refugee, he feels fortunate. We have been welcomed. We have been able to integrate well. We have contributed to the richness of the art and to the economy of our host country. And now I will share a little bit about the Laotians. So Laos is a different place now than it was during the war. For one, there are tourists everywhere. And for those of you who have been to Laos, you'll know that the country is incredibly beautiful. The people are friendly and easygoing, and the atmosphere is relaxed. It is one of my favorite places in the world. But 50 years ago, it was a different place. In the 1962 Geneva Accord, the Vietnamese and Americans signed a neutrality agreement over Laos, promising not to have troops in the country. They both broke the agreement. It's estimated that over 500,000 Vietnamese troops crossed the border using the infamous Ho Chi Minh Trail to support their war efforts. Trying to disrupt the trail and other activities, the Americans dropped more bombs in Laos than they did in all of World War II. And Laos was left broken and in poverty. 30% of its country was, and still is, infested with cluster bombs that have killed or maimed over 50,000 people in Laos, 40% of whom are children. People could meet their basic human needs, nutrition and health, education, or participation in society. They felt hopeless for their and their children's future. So they took boats across the Mekong River. They swam through rough waters. They walked through thick jungles in Thailand. And they came to Canada. And for the most part, those stories were ones of renewal. At the beginning, many Laotians experienced difficulty with the extreme cold temperatures, strange foods, communication in English and French, taking public transit, manual labor jobs as their foreign credentials were not recognized, and loneliness. One interviewee recalled being at Breezeback reception center here in Edmonton and seeing the soldiers eating cereal with milk, and he thought it was disgusting because it was a soggy cereal that they were eating. And another described how her father was a pharmacist in Laos, but ended up working at the Northwest Drug Company, but not as a pharmacist. So the majority of those who were privately sponsored, who came to Canada, felt welcomed and supported by their sponsors who provided homes, clothing, fridge full of food, as well as other settlement support. Some became friends and were adopted by their Canadian sponsor families. However, there were a few negative experiences as well. A well-educated Laotian family who spoke fluent French upon arrival in Canada were thought as fake refugees. My own family was not provided with adequate housing. If you saw the film, we were placed in a 2-room house with no running water, no heat, no washroom, and it was located right in the church's graveyard. Coming from a Buddhist culture, living in a cemetery was a big shock for our family. Soon after the refugees arrived in Canada, they were able to establish cultural associations, Buddhist temples, and housing cooperatives that were helpful in providing social and cultural support and contributed to their successful integration. I'll leave you with one short reading, one that recognizes the fullness of time, where these former refugees in Canada have both benefited from each other. And so I'm going to read from our book, the story of Lu Song, who reflects on his family. Many parents talk about the sacrifices they made in their own lives so that their children could have a better future. Today, Lu has 5 children and 4 grandchildren, and the hardships are in the past. Regarding his children, he shares that 2 finished college and 3 finished university, and the oldest is working for the federal government. One is a civil engineer, one is a mechanic, one is a nurse. In coming to Canada, Lu says, "We worked hard. We want a better life for our children. And us, we are the oldest generation. We come to Canada without a penny, without knowing English, but we can still survive. Like right now, most people own a house and has a couple of cars outside the garage. You should be better than your grandpa and grandma. And so we encourage our kids to be better people, better citizens for the country." Thank you.
That cereal story is really funny because I remember growing up seeing my mom eat rice for breakfast. I was like, that's so weird. She eats cereal and rice. So joining us for this conversation is, of course, so we're going to introduce the rest of our event speakers. Joining us for this conversation is, of course, Mike and Stephanie, as well as Dr. Tan Lê, as the senior pastor of Edmonton Vietnamese Alliance Church, celebrating his 40th year with the church this month. A graduate of the Western Seminary and Canadian Theological Seminary, Dr. Tan holds a Bachelor of Arts in Religion and Philosophy, Master of Divinity, Doctor of Ministry, and Doctor of Missiology. With the experience speaking at and training pastors at Alliance churches around the world. He was the director of the Worldwide Association of Vietnamese Alliance Church in 2006, and in 2014, he co-authored Mobilizing Vietnamese Diaspora for the Kingdom. In the early 90s, his church sponsored nearly 400 Vietnamese refugees, and he's also a poet.
And our last panelist is Yvonne Ho. She is the founder of Banh Mi Diddy, which you have enjoyed some refreshments here today. It's a Vietnamese sandwich shop. She grew up inspired by the food traditions of her family and her time living in Vietnam. As the daughter of Vietnamese Bo people, Yvonne's work is shaped by the resilience and often unspoken histories of her parents' journey, which later led her to reconnect with culture through food.
I will be moderating this conversation. You guys are so lucky. Stephanie, let's start with you. As a former Laotian refugee yourself and co-author of this book, can you talk about how your experiences immigrating to Canada shaped the book and related museum exhibition?
Thank you.
Everyone might have to turn on their mic.
Thank you for that question. And asked about this question before. How did I get involved in this research and in this work? And it is because of my own personal experience as a refugee. I was a child when I came to Canada with my parents. So there were my parents and the four children. And we had a horrible experience in terms of settlement here in Canada. And so this has greatly impacted me in terms of when I started university. I was always gravitating towards looking at the human condition, looking at peace and conflict studies, looking at how can we resolve conflicts other than through violence and through wars. And so I went and I did psychology, I did counseling psychology, and then I did my PhD in peace and conflict studies, because I wanted to understand, why this was happening and how we can do things better for the next generation. And so I think it's really important, and I think your mayor mentioned as well the importance of sharing positive stories of immigration, positive stories of integration, and the contributions that this group of Southeast Asians have made here in Canada. And so that is really, really important for us to continue to share these stories and to highlight them and to make sure that people hear a different perspective. And so I really wanted to make sure that when I was working on the Hearts of Freedom project, as Mike mentioned earlier, that it has to be a national research project, interviewing people from Vancouver to Halifax. It had to include the 3 ethnic communities from Southeast Asia who were impacted by the Vietnam War. And we needed to be able to invite communities from those three groups, as well as other communities, recent immigrants, recent newcomers, and sponsors and NGOs who are involved in this kind of work. And so I think in our book, in our film, in our documentary, in the exhibition and curriculum, we have included all of these stories and experiences. And so the Hearts of Freedom exhibition, the 3 themes were the escape journeys and refugee camps. The second one was looking at government policies and sponsors that Mike talked about. And then the third was looking at settlement and integration here in Canada. And yes, definitely, my experiences and the hardships that we had helped me in terms of looking at this research and looking at this topic and what can we learn from these experiences. How can we make things better for the newcomers and the people who are coming now and in the future, and how can we help them better integrate here in Canada?
Thank you, Stephanie. Dr. Tan, in the early 1990s, your church sponsored nearly 400 Vietnamese refugees. We're just wondering if you can share what motivated that sponsorship and what reminders or lessons do you think apply today about how we welcome newcomers
So
now?
that some of you may not know the broken English because we discovered there's another verb beside the verb to have, to eat. There was another was to work. To work means you have to use your hand a lot. So I'm just kidding. I'm not supposed to be here because there was Dr. Chung supposed to be here. So I volunteered to be here because at least I can sit here and smile. I have a good smile, so at least I can sit. Yeah, by God's grace, I've been here. I asked many of you. as a Vietnamese refugee, and I came to the U.S. I asked by myself, 20 years old, so you can do the math. This June of which is 71. I didn't know English much, even though we go to school, but I never dared to go to overseas, so that's why we all skip classes. And we do different things. And yet I was here in North America, so I had to learn the language in a hard way. But by God's grace, and that's why I accomplished something in education. But my heart, that God called me to be a servant of God, so that's why I became a pastor. And so the church here in Edmonton, they called me up. When 1981, we established as a church, but without pastor, so they called us up, and so we came here intensively. That we may stay a few years, but unknown to us that at the end of this month, which is few days, we completed our 40 years as a pastor of the church by God's grace. But answer the question, this is not our church only. That's a cooperation, that's a partnership with many other churches, families, and individual or public organization. So we help the family, we assist the family to sponsor their loved one who were in Hong Kong or in others refugee camp. And so our commitment, our pledge to help them or assist them in first year, and then they grew on their own. And so that's what we are able to do. And so unknown to us that we have that numbers, amazingly. But that's not only our church, ourselves. We have many people who are working with us, and we're grateful that we can be a part of it. The main reason why we're doing it, in Vietnamese, we have a saying that lá lành đùm lá cả tơi. Which means the strong help the weak, and the weak helps those even worse off. Or those who are better off help those in need, and those in need helps the less fortunate. And so that's what we motivate to do on the humanitarian purpose. We did help people. We were there at once, and we're not better off yet, but compared to them, somehow we do a little better. And so we give them a hand, give them ears, give them a heart, a shoulder for them to lean on to cry with, and so that's what we be able to do.
Thank you. Thank you once again, and we're very grateful for your church for it. Yvonne, you said your work is shaped by the resilient and often unspoken history of your parents' boat people journey and refugee experience. Can you share more about that? Is it still unspoken? And what stories have your parents shared with you about coming here as refugees that have stuck with you?
Hi everyone. I don't have many stories because my parents aren't storytellers. But there's a story that sits very heavy with me. My dad told me last year, and I'm sorry if it hurts anyone too, because it hurts me. So my dad came to Canada in '79, but before that, his dad had fought in the army. He was killed when my dad was 4 years old. And so my dad was kind of he went to like a US type of military school, and he was a cadet. And that's how he was raised. His mom remarried, and he kind of spent time with his, mostly his grandparents who worked like on a military base. And when the war ended, on the base they had dogs, like the dogs that work with the soldiers. And my dad, when the school kind of closed, he took one of the puppies, and he took it with him to, I can't remember where he was exactly, like somewhere near Cam Ranh in Vietnam. And the dog was a great dog. Like it would alert my dad when there was people who came around, like in the evenings, at night. But the communists who took over, they didn't like that. It was protecting him, protecting the neighborhood, and they, gosh, they didn't like that, so they made my dad kill his own dog. I'm so sorry. It's like a heaviness that sits with me, and I'm sorry to share that with you, but I feel like it's something that needs to be shared, and I don't have many stories, but that one hits me quite hard. And it makes me think, like makes me think when I look around at everyone here, what has everyone been through? We don't know, and you never know with my dad that ever happened. I was so shocked. I was speechless, and I think it's just a way to, I don't know, build empathy for like our fellow people. So that's a heavy story, but my mom, she's definitely not a storyteller either. When I asked her, I crammed before this, and I said, Mom, I need to know more, like, now's the time, can you tell me? And she's like, Yvonne, why are you looking, I look at the future, and other people look at the future, why are you looking at the past? I was like, Mom, I just need to know a few things. And I realized it's unfair of me, I think it's valid for her not to want to share stories. And I think it's like, war is a collective thing that we all experience or are subjected to. And I think a conversation between my mom and I is not going to heal that necessarily. But I think I won't lean completely on my mother for these stories that maybe hurt her to tell. But I think it's like us getting together like this, and like you collecting stories in the book and the film, it's just as healing. And I think it's like I don't have to force my mother to tell these awful stories, but it's like us, like everyone being here, that's like helps heal. So.
Mike, when it comes to welcoming immigrants to the country, Canada historically is known to have accepted the most Indo-Chinese refugees, and that's largely because of what became the world's first private refugee sponsorship program and Canada's biggest and successful refugee immigration project. So you've said before that this program welcomed hundreds of thousands of Southeast Asian refugees and took place at a time when multiculturalism in Canada was a fairly new concept. The mayor sort of alluded to this, but today we're seeing a lot of pushback around immigration and refugee policies. Wondering, from your perspective, does it feel like we're moving backwards here? And how do we change that? How do we get back on the right course?
Did that work? Yeah. Okay. That's a really long and complicated question. I think, first of all, in terms of multiculturalism, the first thing I say about multiculturalism was only announced as a government policy about 3 years before the Indo-Chinese movement happened. And for many of us, it was something that we didn't understand very much. Somebody said, oh yeah, it's about pierogies and polkas, because that's how who the newcomers were. It was something that the politicians talked about on Canada Day, but for the rest of us it didn't mean very much. And it's my belief that when 7,500 groups of Canadians went down to the immigration office and promised and signed forms saying, we will take a refugee, and they met that refugee at the airport or the bus depot or wherever it was they showed up, and took them to the apartment that they prepared for them, and showed them what was in the fridge, and realized that the clothes they bought were going to have to be exchanged for something a slightly different size, and in some cases came and realized that people weren't quite sure whether they should sleep on the bed, in the bed, or under the bed, because it was all new for some of the people. When they encountered that, multiculturalism for the first time became a lived experience for what we used to call mainstream Canadians. And if you talk about 7,000 groups, you are talking about hundreds of thousands of people, because there are probably 5 or 6 people in that group who are the hands-on people. But when the collection plate goes around, 700 or 800 people typically throw a buck into the plate for that, for the sponsorship project. So they're all implicated, and they all have to become advocates of openness and inclusion and plurality. So I think that's the historic importance of this particular movement, was that a group of people that most of us knew nothing about, had never talked to, a country that we only heard bad things about. These people arrived. It humanized the other. They weren't faceless people that we were seeing in the news. They were the 5 people who showed up, who came out of the arrival lounge, looking very surprised and confused, and who we realized, these are our people. We're going to have to bring them into our family, in our community. And I think that had a profound effect. And the fact that there are so many private sponsorships on the books today, that the government has had to halt the income of new applications, which is unfortunate. Nevertheless, to me, it says that the spirit of humanitarianism in this country is far from dead, and it's for the government to catch up with where the people are. Okay, so that's one strand. I think the debate that's going on in this country about whether immigration, refugees is a good thing, is a kind of futile discussion, because it's not going to stop. And some of it has seeped into this country from across the border, where horrible things are happening. Many people will toy with the idea of, oh, well, maybe we should stop immigration, and then they'll go to McDonald's and find that there's nobody there serving them, or there's nobody there helping with the crops, or there's nobody there when the concrete has to be poured, or because what I observed at the age of 81 in my life, in my neighborhood, in the church that I sometimes frequent, and the stores that I go to, is that every third or fourth person is obviously a newcomer. Now, new in having been here 20 years, or new in having got off the bus 6 months ago. The idea of absorbing newcomers into our society is so organic to what Canada is, that we can have discussions about good or bad or nothing. The only conclusion we can have is that it is good, and that we need to get better at it, but that our society, for the most part, is open, and it's basically the government that has to catch up.
Thank you very much. Similar question, with the current political and societal climate around immigration, what are you hoping people to read the book and visit the exhibit, watch the oral history videos, what are you hoping that they take from it? And are there some lessons here that you're hoping that they learn?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's a really good question, and I hope that people will take from the book, the film, our website, curriculum that we're going to be finishing developing, and the Hearts of Freedom exhibition, that these are real people. These are stories, and if we're able to share these stories with one another, I think having that personal connection, right? By sharing stories, we're connecting with one another. We're building relationships with one another. And if we're able to share these stories, then we will be able to connect and build relationships with one another, and to stress again that they are making such great contributions. they're hard workers, and they are making contributions in the arts, in the sciences, in various areas, and they're paying taxes, and they're contributing in so many ways. And I think we need to really focus on that the immigrants and refugees, what they bring to this country. And I was just in Bangkok, bringing my exhibition there, and I partnered with the Canadian Embassy and the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees at Chulalongkorn University. And it was really amazing to be there. And they were talking about, in February 2026, Canada and Thailand just celebrated 65 years of diplomatic relationship. And then in December 2025, the United Nations, Canada and Thailand also celebrated the collaboration that they've had over the last 50, 60 years in terms of helping refugees in some ways as humanitarian assistance and resettlement of refugees. And so this gives me hope, right, that we can make a difference. And when I was in Thailand, they talked about in the fall of 2025, the Thai government gave, for the very first time, the refugees who are from Myanmar along the Thai-Burma border, or Myanmar border, the 9 refugee camps, they finally have the right to work, the legal right to work. And that's a huge thing that is happening in terms of looking at policies and how those policies can be more welcoming or more inclusive, and how can these policies help them integrate or help them be able to provide for their families. So that's really exciting. And then just last month, my counterpart, who I worked with from the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, she sent an email and she said, "Stephanie, I witnessed firsthand the Rohingya refugees who had fled Myanmar and are in Thailand. They were actually walking, and they were walking up onto the plane and getting boarded on the plane to come to Canada to be resettled. But we don't hear those stories, and this was just in March. And so it gives me hope that governments and citizens, NGOs, and all of these people are working together, collaborating together to assist people who are in need of assistance, and that we can be compassionate, and that we can show that we protect humanitarian kinds of situations, and that we're willing to help. And so, so these are just current experiences that I've just had within the last few months, and I hope that we hear more of these stories.
Thank you. And so, Dr. Kênh, what do you think communities, whether faith-based or not, can learn from showing up to support people in times of crisis? What are your thoughts around that?
To me, I think that we need to look for others' needs more than us. And if we compare with us, I think we're still better off in some way. So if we open our arms and receive them with love, with acceptance, with appreciation, with dignity, we can give them a platform, this solid grounded to build their lives once again. We heard so very much about negatives of refugees, and certainly there's not a few bad apples, but we need to look at the contributions that the newcomer come in and contribute to this country. The first generation, they work very hard. They forget and they humble, they swallow their pride to take any kind of jobs in order to build their life once again. If not for them, they will do it for their children. And so we take a look at how they raise up the next generation. They can contribute greater to this country. And so I think that if we can give some understanding, acceptance, encouragement, sympathy, and we will help people who are new to this country they can get less culture shock because they come here with so many new things, language, culture, and even weather. Christmas is still here yet. And so if we share with them what we have, we don't need to do more than what we have. We just share with them, and I think that would be a good thing. And so I hope that we can see the plus side, the contribution to this country. For instance, I'm not boast about it, but my wife and I, we contribute to this country. Our son is a medical doctor. He serves right now, right here. And so that's where he wants to work with our people. I asked where he wants to serve. I said, I want to help our Vietnamese people, those who cannot speak the language. So I think that's great because, because of opportunities, they can build up their lives here and they can contribute back to it. And so that's what I think we should look at it and help them out. If not anything else, just have a good smiling, a good understanding, a word and welcome, words of encouragement. I think we make us have a better beginning and have a lot better future.
You see both your parents are like bad storytellers, but you're very good. As adult children of Vietnamese boat people, it feels like we're increasingly on this journey to better understand our family history. You grew up cooking with your father, known as Diddy, who your banh mi shop is named after. Can you tell us more about the role that food has that played in your cultural understanding or your experience of being Vietnamese?
I just want to start with saying my parents think it's absolutely ridiculous that I have a banh mi shop. They're like, why? Why would you squander this amazing opportunity? So I really think of To when she says your parents are certain of, and they probably wish I was a To, but food. I think food, we're from a working class family, so I think food, spending time together over food is really just practical. I think it's really just a practical and low-cost way to spend time together. So a lot of my core memories are being in the kitchen with my mom and my dad, actually, even though banh mi Diddy is named after my dad. Maybe there's a banh mi mummy coming, I don't know. But
heard it here first.
But yeah, food. Yeah, I think it's a way to show love through action. It's quiet, like my parents would never say I love you or anything like that, but like most of us here, we experience our parents cutting us fruit and quietly in the kitchen, spending time making us delicious food. And it gets reinforced every day when I'm at banh mi Diddy for 12 hours a day making this food. And I remember, oh my gosh, my parents really love me because the work that it takes to make food is absolutely ridiculous. And I love it and I'm quite passionate about it, and that's where it comes from. So I think it's like food is love.
If anyone in the audience has a question for any of our panelists.
The question is directed to Mike. Mike, you mentioned that you're introducing a refugee program into the school curriculum. This is across Canada. And does it just focus on the Vietnamese, or is it a more general curriculum of all refugees or so on? Do you know much about it?
I wish. Stephanie and I have had some discussions about this in the last 2 hours. The design is being done. There are five of us in the core and a few others, and the designs up to this point has been done by two other people that we're not. But I think the idea is to use the Indo-Chinese experience as an example and as a starting point for the understanding of what it means to be a refugee and what the consequences of that are, and what we as a society can do. So I think if you're, and I was hoping that actually there would be that kind of a focus, because first of all, we have such a rich amount of money, of material to draw on, that we can pull students into, and it seems to me if you can inculcate into grade 8, grade 9 students an understanding of what a refugee is and what they go through, and focus on the fact that we're not just talking about adults here, we're talking about children and infants. You could use almost any example, so I think what you'll see rolling out is very much, will draw very much on the book, on the documentary, on the interviews, and with the idea though that it's, by teaching about this group, we teach about all refugees.
And I know I have spoken to university classes about this, and even though the stories are from Southeast Asia, from these three communities, I will have a student who is from Sri Lanka and say, oh no, that happened to us as well. There was carpet bombing in our country. Or a student from Syria, and they said, this happened to us as well. And so there's lots of connections, even though the case study, I would say, would be the Southeast Asian refugees, but it has connections to current and real life situations with whether it's Syrian refugees or Ethiopians and Congolese or Rohingyas. We can make the connection. And even though we're using this as a case study, and as Mike said, we have so much material, and in the curriculum we'll have connections to all of these different things. And if people are interested, they can go and actually watch the whole interview on the Hearts of Freedom website if they're interested in that particular story. But it does connect to current situations.
Thank you.
Hello. I would like to also say that I'm also one of those old kids, so it's the experience going through it over the same, especially in Hong Kong. So my question is about the immigration. Now this thing, immigration and then refugee. So from what happened for the government now, is they less focused on the refugee, more on immigration, kind of, people that have well-to-do and come here like for work permit or some kind of skilled labor. I think other countries we kind of losing the humanity of it, if accept refugee. And also that also disturbed me that some of the refugees here so are against that kind of stuff. And it kind of hurt my feeling a lot that the actual refugee actually against other refugees coming here instead of they're embracing immigration on the other form. I just like to know what the kind of thing about what I just said.
Yeah, I think we are having a lot of anti-immigration, anti-refugee sentiments, and that's why it is so important, right, to share these kinds of stories. And I think even during the Southeast Asian refugee movement, Mike, you probably remember, the polls were about 50-50, right? Those who were against bringing Southeast Asians to Canada, and those who say, no, we need to do something because there's a humanitarian crisis in Southeast Asia. But they had enough people in leadership, whether it's in government, NGOs, and in the community, who said, we want to do this, we want to help. And so their voices became more prominent, and then they were able to do these things. And I was just looking at some of the posters and banners, right? Project 4000, MCC, Mennonite Central Committee, Operation Lifeline. Like, there were these people who said, no, we have to do something about it, even though there were half the population who did not want to resettle refugees, and they were scared that, oh, the communists are coming, because those three countries fell to the communists. But I think there were enough other people who stood up and said, and they were vocal, and they said, we need to do this because this is the right thing. We need to assist those who are in need. And I think people need to remember, as I think Mike said, we are all immigrants, or we have parents, grandparents, great-grandparents who were immigrants. And so with the Mennonites, for example, they stepped up during the Southeast Asian refugee movement because they themselves remember that they were forced to flee former Soviet Union, which is now Ukraine, and they left because of the communists, and then they were sponsored to come to Canada. So they remember those kinds of experiences and stories, and they said, now we want to assist and to privately sponsor. And so they were the first group to sign the agreement with the federal government to privately sponsor refugees. And then soon after that, other dioceses and other groups began to do the same thing. And so I think we need to remember these stories, because if we don't remember, then people think, oh, this is, really negative right now. And I said, the positive stories and the contributions. So, you have Tu Pormar, who is now the city councillor. We were just with Her Honor, the Lieutenant Governor, Soma Lakani, who is a former refugee from Uganda. I think about former Governor General Adrian Clarkson, who was a former refugee from Hong Kong, and Mikhail Jean was a former refugee from Haiti. And then those of you who are here from Edmonton, Alfonso Davies, the star soccer player who plays for, I believe, in Germany, right? He is a former refugee from Ghana, but I think he was Liberian, and he went to Ghana, and then in 2005 he came to Canada, and now he's a big superstar soccer player. So we have to remember these stories, and I think we need to celebrate them, and I think there are more positive stories of immigration, and we need to celebrate those stories.
I think one of the things that we can all do is remember that it's one thing to talk about the Syrians. I mean, they've got a bad rap as enemies of Israel, strange, totalitarian country, on and on and on and on. And then we see little Alan Kurdi lying face down in the sand. And all of a sudden, they're humans. And I think one of the great reasons for the book is that I think we realize that you humanize people through stories. And when you focus on when you see a mass of refugees, it's actually easy to turn away. When you see a family, a woman, a child who's a refugee, there's nothing in us that allows us to turn away. And so I really think that I really believe in the power of stories as a way of sustaining compassion. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Yeah, I would just like to add to what Mike was saying. Storytelling, everyone can do storytelling, whether you are professional or not, and there are different ways of telling stories through words, through films, through books, through art, through exhibition, and it's a way of connecting and building relationships, and then if we do it and share it and have these events over food, as you mentioned, food is so important. And it really connects us to one another. And I'm just so thankful, like looking at the audience, that there are first, second, third generation here, and our hosts, Jess and Linda, from the younger generation, because it's that next generation that can continue, right, sharing some of these stories and some of the work that the previous generation has done. And so we do need our young people, and I'm just so excited to hear about their projects, and hopefully we can encourage, right, other groups to become involved.
I just want to encourage you to say that they were saying that in Vietnamese, ngó lên thì không bằng ai, ngó xuống thì chẳng ai bằng mình. Because if we compare with something upper, then you nowhere near. But if you just look down, then you have something more than someone else. And so that even not necessary material things, just a look, a warm smile, a word of encouragement. There are so many needed, and that's one start. And you can build up a relationship, build up a friendship, and you never know. One encouraging word can go a long, long way. So I encourage you to do it. Don't wait, because the opportunity is right there, right now, around you.
On the theme of storytelling, I think I just want to encourage people who might have shame around their stories to be able to tell them. I think maybe that's my mother, but that's just what I suspect. But it's okay to tell because you're going to have a stubborn daughter or stubborn child who wants those stories. Or if your children don't want the stories, it's going to be the grandchildren. Like the stories have to come out at some point, and I think we're just, I think it's important. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's give a round of applause for our panelists. As we wrap up, I just want to remind everyone we do have the space for about another hour. So following this, I do encourage, if you haven't yet, to purchase the book Hearts of Freedom. Mike, Dr. Stephanie, Mike's lovely wife Jo, they're signing books over there as well. We also have, this is intentional, on the one side with the green banners. It's a great history, I think, or they've done a really good job capturing the past on this side, so we encourage you to look to see how particularly the Vietnamese and the Southeast Asian refugees have come to Canada and the path that they took. And then on the right-hand side, we've got a small exhibit here with notable Vietnamese Edmontonians, so profiles on people currently today in the city making an impact as we look towards the future, and that's something that our group in Cung Nhau is really trying to connect that past with where we came from and where we go from here. And there are still refreshments as well, so please do help us finish the food. And we will say, please also help us stack the chairs. You don't have to, it's a volunteer-run organization. I want to note also that if you Google notable Edmontonians, Linda's name comes up, but she wouldn't let me put her in this ranking. So, so just wanted to mention that. So before we end this discussion today, we wanted to invite back up Drew Hu, the president of the Edmonton Viet Association, to just say some closing remarks.
Just on behalf of the Edmonton Viet Association and Vietnamese community, I would like to thank the people that we haven't thanked before, especially the ladies Linda and Jessica from We Together. The ladies are great organizers. They always help us in different events within the Vietnamese community, even other events within the community itself. I'd like to especially thank the panel speakers, Mr. Mike Malloy, Stephanie Stovey, Pastor Lê Trung Tan, and Yvonne Ho, to answer several different questions. I also like to thank the city mayor, Andrew Nat, city council Sue Palmer, to save some time to spend some time with us today. And all the attendees, as I said, we hope that you have a great open heart memorial time with us. And not forgetting the city of Edmonton and staff to provide us the place to have this event happen. Thank you very much.
And lastly, we
we do want to just do a special thank you and shout out to Buck G. He's standing right there. He was featured in the film. He's really connected everyone here today, and he's done so much work over the last many decades. We feel quite honored at Trung ta Công Nhau to be able to work with him and share his knowledge and kind of use that to bridge younger and older generations. So thank you so much, Buck G.
Sorry, I could miss this one because Dr. Nyung, president of the Vietnamese Children Development Foundation, she couldn't attend today because of her health condition there, I believe, and she has contributed and support a lot in different Vietnamese events, and we continue to pray for her that her health gets better. Thanks.
Yeah, so everyone please go enjoy some more refreshments, take a look at everything, and if you want, maybe stack a chair or two.